I've been asked many times to talk about my experience of what I know about Nadi Palm Reading. I had one done in 2010 in Pune, India, at the behest of and the orders of the guru I was with at his ashram. At the time I was there, I was at the ashram spending about 3 months, and the guru approached me and told me that I needed to go get my Nadi Palm Reading. I had no clue what he was talking about. I didn't know what a nadi was. Palm, I didn't know if he was talking about the hand or a palm leaf, or uh, if this was a fortune telling thing, if this was some kind of astrology chart. I had no clue. I told him I didn't believe in these things. I didn't need it. I didn't want it. I had no desire. He ended up ordering me 3 times to go, not suggesting, but actually ordering me to go get it done. And I kept telling him, I don't believe in it. And he said, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. For you, it's going to be true. And so I'm sending you there. So I didn't want to go, so I asked him, well, tell me something about it. And then he began to tell me the history of it, how these palm leaves were cut in the fronds, off of them. It was just a piece of palm wood. And the great rishis from 2,500 to 5,000 years ago channeled information for people coming in the future. And supposedly they dictated this to these scribes who wrote it on this thing and shellacked it and tried to preserve it. But there was like millions of these things done. There is not one for everybody, but there are those for the people that go looking for them that are supposed to find them. So if you have to have one, you'll find it and it'll be there. So that's what I was told. And so originally he told me that these palms, and they look like Venetian blinds. They're about so big, and they're cut, and there's holes drilled through them with a cord, so that all these are together. And there's thousands of these. Anyway, they were stored at a palace. In fact, it was his wife's family's palace in southern India, someplace, and in the library. And in when the British were there in the 1800s or sometime, there was fire, and some of the British stole some of them, and so to preserve them, make sure that these things weren't lost to antiquity or to thieves or destroyed, they separated them and they divided them and sent them out around the country. So they're at many locations. How many, I don't know. I was told 15. Somebody said 18, 20. So the exact number, I don't know. But all I know is they're divided up. So if you had one of these on your life, you're supposed to get this information, you'd have to be somehow directed to the right one where it's at. So that already kind of threw me up. I'm thinking, yeah, okay, fine. They got all these millions. How are they going to find us? I asked him how they found them. And he says, well, it's your thumbprint. For men, it's the right thumbprint. For women, it's the left thumbprint. And just like in astrology, there's 12 signs, zodiac. Well, there's 108 different groupings or personality types or whatever from the thumbprint. So it's like 108 of them, and they're categorized and filed that way. How they find the individual one after that, I have no clue. So I'm told this, so already I'm a skeptic, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, fine. So he told me, he says, specifically, I want you to find out about the life that's affecting you today, and you find out the worst sin from that life, and get the remedies. Okay, so I reluctantly went, and there was 3 other people going from the ashram on their own, and so I went with them because they knew where they were going. It was a place you would probably never find. It was discreetly just sitting in some alley, looked like an office building, and you go in there and they take your thumbprint and they ask you to put your initial next to your thumbprint. And so I put W. I don't want to give any identification out. I don't go by William. That's my legal name, but I go by Bill. So I just put W. Sat there about an hour, and about an hour later they called me in to this room. It's about the size of a small bedroom. And it's got every holy picture and statue you can think of. It's got incense, it's got candles, it's got everything going. I mean, it really feels new age psychedelic. It's there. It has every aspect you can think of. So I'm not impressed. I'm going in there thinking, okay, they're setting me up here. And I'm thinking like this is like a Las Vegas mentalist act. They're going to read me, read my body language, do all these things. And so I'm only going to answer their questions, yes or no. And they're told you that's all you got to do, yes or no. So I'm not going to give any clues and explain why it's a yes or explain why it's a no. And so we go into this thing. He comes in with this like Venetian blind pile. I don't know how many's in a pile, but about yay big. And he sets it on the table. The table's like an altar. I'm sitting there with him, and he is in front of me. And he goes through the first 6, and I had no's on 6 of them. So he put them aside, and he said, well, intuitively, he says, intuitively, I feel the 7th one is yours. I said, okay. So he opens it up, and he looks on there, and he says, your name has 4 letters. I said, okay, yes. And he says, it starts with B. And that's interesting because I put W down on my initial, on my thumbprint. So I thought I was impressed. Okay, they got B. And he goes, it's Bill. And he spelled it out, Bill. I'm going, okay. I thought, well, maybe he overheard somebody talking to me in the lobby or something. So I'm not impressed. And then he goes, and your name is the same as your father's was. Exactly. Wow, that was pretty good because first off, I used the term was. My father's been dead since 1973. But he also said the same exact name. And I'm William McDonald Jr. Same exact name. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then he says, and your mother's name is Marcella. And he mispronounced it. But I looked on this thing that he was reading from, and it had all this Sanskrit or some weird language I didn't know anything about. And all of a sudden, in English printed letters, was spelled out Marcella and Bill. So I was impressed. I was going, wow, that's pretty good. And he goes, both your parents have been dead for a couple decades at least. And I go, yes. And he says, we don't have a word for it in our vocabulary, but somehow this thing says you were kind of like a foster kid or something, meaning, and I'm looking at the guy going, yeah, meaning what? And he says, well, one of your parents wasn't there for you, and maybe at one time none of your parents were. So I said yes, but I didn't explain to him that I never saw my father. I was an infant when he left, so I never saw him, and I had a stepfather. And at 8 years old, I ended up in a hospital, in a county hospital, and basically was gone from home for a year and rarely saw my family at all. So that was close. I thought, okay, maybe that's what he meant. But all I said was yes. I didn't give an explanation. And then he goes, and your wife's name, and I go, okay, this will be interesting, is Carol. And I'm going, what? That's when I started to get impressed. I'm going, wow, okay, Carol. And he goes on, and she's a graduate of a high institution, a great college in your country. And I go, yes. I didn't tell him University of California, Berkeley. I think that's a pretty good school. And he goes, and her degree is in psychology or something related like that. And that's exactly what it was. And I said, yes. And he says, you have 2 children, a boy and then a girl. And I said, yes. And he says, you have grandchildren? Yes. Both your children are married and they love you. Well, I had to ask you. I had to answer yes. I don't. You have to ask them that question, but I said yes. And then he goes, and he says, and your birthday is, just out of the blue, he goes, March 16th, 1946. And I'm going, wow, that's pretty good. But here was the more amazing thing. He goes, but we don't know the exact minute of your birth. One something between 110 and 120 or 130, 125, 150. We don't know, which was kind of odd because he was just rolling these things out. What I didn't tell him was that even my doctor didn't know my actual time of birth. So I was born when the doctor wasn't there. He took a guess. and he guessed about 110, 115, and so nobody's exactly sure of the exact minute of my birth. And in this reading, they didn't know. So I thought, that's an interesting little tidbit. And he went on and he said, now I'm going to ask you a question, and this will tell us and let you know that this was the right time, the right moment to come in here and have this done. Otherwise, when we ask you this question, it'll have no meaning if you're coming at the wrong time. I said, okay. And he says, you recently worked on, and then he paused. And he says, well, it says play here, but they didn't have movies back then. So he says, I'm intuitively saying movies. You recently worked on a movie, but not as an actor. I go, wow. Yes, the month before I left the States, I I was asked my advice on a film, and a great film. It was a really good film about soldiers, and I didn't like the ending of it, and so I suggested a new ending for the movie, and I wrote it on a little piece of paper in a coffee house at the hotel, and gave it to the guy, Martini, the guy that Chris Martini, the guy that was doing the movie. Trooper was the film. Anyway, and he took that and he rewrote the ending, and it changed the whole impact of the film, and things went great. But nobody knew that. I didn't share that story with anybody. So nobody really knew that, not there in India. So I said yes. And that was to tell me that that was the right time and place, because had I come in the year before, it wouldn't have made any sense. Had I come in the next year, it wouldn't have been had just recently done so. So at this point, he went in through a series of about 30 more questions. Everything from the fact that I wrote books, I wrote spiritual books, nonfiction books, that I was working on a book presently about this guru, which I said, yes, I was. And then he says, and your guru is Lord Shiva, which is impossible because you can't be a direct disciple of Lord Shiva. And I said, I don't know. And then he asked again, and he says, and you're a disciple of this guru that you're with today. And I go, okay, yeah, I guess. And then he went through another 30 questions, and every one of them was yes, 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 yes. And I was impressed. One of the things he talked about, he says, it was a spiritual nature of my life and everything else. So he gets through, and I reach into my pocket and I pull out my wallet. I'm going to pay the guy. I thought that was the reading. And he goes, no, 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 no. That's not the reading. That's just the index cards. And now we will go get your charts and we'll do them. And I was just sitting there going, wow, this is really interesting. So 6 hours later, I was taken upstairs and I was given the full reading, which I will describe in another video. But just pointing out a couple things about Nadi Palm readings. One, if your guru sends you, you're destined to go. If you go on the internet or you go someplace on your own, you're taking your chances without somebody having recommended or know the people to be reputable, because there's a lot of fraud going on in India. They see Westerners coming. This is a good way for them to make money. And if you have one done, don't volunteer any information. Don't tell them anything. Don't share nothing. It's just yes or no. But I was impressed. And I saw the actual palm leaves, and they were old, crackled, and preserved. There was no way in the world they could have out and manufactured it and come back in an hour and showed it to me. So I was impressed. So that was about the Nadi reading process, and I'm going to discuss that on my next video, what they predicted from the past, the future, and my present life. So Nadi Palm readings. There's more to life than you realize. They're true. It's phenomenal. I can't explain it. I didn't even believe in it before.